Oh, okay. So my name is Gina Hugo. I am the current chair of Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails, and happy to be kind of launching us off on this forum talking about EAB this morning, Emerald Ash Borer. And joining us in a little bit is going to be Josh Baas, and he is the park maintenance supervisor for the city of Elk River. So my day job is the parks director for Sherburne County. So Josh Boss being in Elk River, he and I have worked closely together on all things trees for many years, surely over a decade. So we both have kind of a different perspective on how we're dealing with EAB in our respective jurisdictions. But um, I'm interested before we get started to hear from everybody just with an introduction, and we're going to keep this really informal today. But if you could just introduce yourself, where you're from, and what your current situation is with EAB. And I'm admitting people as we speak. So I'm going to go just in order of who I see on my screen next. And I see Scott Repke. Scott, could you unmute and introduce yourself if you're with us? Oh, he says he's in a loud environment and not ready to participate verbally. Okay, very well. That's fair. Next, I see Joe Chapeski.
Hello, yes, Joe Chapeski, System Plan Coordinator with the Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission. Also own a few ash trees on some land, and I'm just curious about this subject, but I'm hoping you're going to tell me I'm still a little too far north to be receiving it up in Beltrami and Clearwater counties. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So I see Jason, and I'm sorry if I butcher your name, anybody. Jason Sayon. Okay. Jason, are you with us? Can you hear us? Okay. Well, if you're ever ready to introduce yourself, just unmute and raise your hand. Oh, there he is.
Hello, hi, I'm Jason Sehan. I'm with the city of Austin, and thanks for putting this together. Looking forward to learning some things.
Awesome. Thanks. You're right in the thick of things down in the southeast part of the state, huh?
We
Or
are, we
southern part
are,
of the state.
I feel like we're a little bit late to the game, but we are right smack dab in the middle of it. Uh, we've treated a bunch of trees last year. I'm glad we did because we don't really have many left to treat this year, and unfortunately, trees are coming down in the thousands right now.
Yeah,
So we're what I'm hoping to learn the most about cutting down a tree is as sad as it is, it's the easiest part of the process. Replanting is what keeps me up at night, and how we're gonna find the time and resources to water and care for trees for the next 3 years or so. But
absolutely. That's a huge issue. So thanks for sharing that right off the bat.
yep.
I see Jennifer Zeimer next.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, hi Jennifer.
Okay, perfect. Jennifer Zemer from Goodhue County Public Works, and we have pretty small park properties. We have two parks and a canoe and kayak launch in Goodhue County that provides access to the Cannon River. At that site, we are not treating any ash trees. At our Billsby Park, we have been treating ash trees for several years now, and we'll be treating them again this year. We're on an every other year rotation, and that seems to be working well. We've been able to preserve the ash trees that we have so far. We are not treating any trees in our county right of way. So we have lost all of those. We've been treating them around our shops and office buildings where it would be difficult to replant right now. Um, just treating it as it comes. Thankfully, at our more wooded site, that's an older growth forest near Kenyon, we don't have a lot of ash trees currently at that site, so we haven't had a lot of issues out there. We've had more so because of the flux in weather, the really wet season, and then the dry season we have heavy clay soils, so we've been having some oak decline out there.
Okay. Yeah, our trees are really threatened. It's truly frightening. Keeps me up at night too. So, for those of you that are just joining, we are going around and doing introductions and just telling in a few sentences about where you're at in the journey with emerald ash borer in your landscapes. So, I see Eric Anderson on the screen next.
Yeah, good morning. Eric from the City of Frazee Parks and Rec Committee, also on a nonprofit that's developing Wanigan Regional Park, 157-acre park that newly acquired. So we're just getting underway with phase 1 development, but as part of that, we're undertaking a forestry management plan, and we recently completed a tree inventory at Wanigan Regional Park. With over 1,000 trees tagged, inventoried, and just a status given as to overall health, height, and so forth. So obviously a large number of those are ash trees, and as Joe stated, being this far north, I hope it's not an issue yet, but we just want to get ahead of the game.
Yeah, they say emerald ash borer, the insect itself, cannot fly that far in a given year, maybe 5 to 10 miles. Um, but uh, in firewood, it can travel across the nation in a matter of days. So it's pretty amazing. So you're only like one truckload of firewood away from having EAB in your community. That's how I like to think about it. So I am up to Travis next. Travis Giffen. Good morning, Travis.
Good morning. So yeah, as far as the journey that and I guess I forgot my introduction, Travis Giffen, Public Works Director for the city of Thief River Falls. We do have 19 parks in the city, and then of course our right-of-ways. A couple of years ago, I think I applied for the first round of grants, but know that there was a lot of cities with a lot of bigger problems. We don't currently have anything in the city of Thief River Falls. So I guess the plan has been to try to acquire an inventory with our parks and right-of-ways within the next couple of years, if possible. Like every probably other community, we deal with priorities. And of course, it's tough to juggle the inventory or data collection to the top of the priority list. But I do have a full-time GIS technician that we've put in place a couple of years ago. So we do have the tools if we can get the priorities to the top. And again, I probably still would look for maybe grant assistance for a group that specializes in that. I would say that if we encounter, we'll say an ash tree in the question of say, whether we take it down or not, haven't been trying to save anything because it hasn't hit here, and been just trying to prepare for really the information that seems to get to me is once it's in your community, it's going to go through and try to minimize the risk. So I've just been any questionable type of removal, I've just been actively taking down the ash trees if there's a question.
All right. Yeah. Well, getting prepared ahead of time is absolutely key. You're right on. So thanks for sharing that. So I'm going to go on to John Smith. Hi, John.
Good morning. Hi, John Smith, City Manager of Perham, Minnesota. So it looks like we got good representation in our area, which is always good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so We're kind of at the very beginning stages as well. We're just talking about doing an inventory this spring. We just got our GIS up and moving so we can have volunteers go out and actually do the identification, working with our Boy Scout groups and local Rotary group and all of that. So we'll be doing identification training as well as how to work the GIS and all that kind of stuff. So we're kind of at the beginning phases. We have a small action plan written up, but again, understand the need. I think what was the last time we did inventory? 2010, like the national inventory list or state park list or however that went. We're estimated to have over like 3,000 ash trees, I think, within the city of Perham. So we know there's a need to address those. We have, I think, well over 600 acres of parks within the city. So we're starting with boulevard trees and doing kind of those low-hanging fruits that we can address and identify quickly, just to start coming up with that plan and then working through kind of what those the park system and the park plans look like. Thankfully, most of our parks are pine trees, but we know that there's a mix of ash and everything else in there as well. So
Right. Yeah. Thank you, John. I think we've gone through everybody. If there's somebody on that I missed, could you please go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself? Okay, great. So until Josh Baas gets on the meeting, I'm going to just start off with a little bit of my history. I before I came to work at Sherburne County as the Parks Director, I worked for the Sherburne Conservation District for 20 years. And one of my last major projects was the community forestry project, where we in 2013 initiated community tree inventories for every city in Sherburne County. And we recruited a large um, group of volunteers. There were 50. And we trained them all on tree ID, tree measurements, and we also train them on condition rating. So, really looking at kind of the condition of a tree, if it had a lot of defects and was very prone to failure, it would get a low condition rating. If it had good form, good structure, no defects, it would get a high condition rating, just very basic. Um, and we kind of set the parameters for trees to inventory with only inventorying the trees that were mowed all the way around. So in maintained areas where they could pose a threat to people or property in the highest regard, I guess. Um, and with that, we had the ability then to figure out what percentage of the urban canopies were made up of ash and how big of a threat emerald ash borer was to each community. And then each community developed an emerald ash borer preparedness plan. And you've heard some of the participants on today talk about preparedness plans or action plans. And those are very important steps because it helps you to learn where your strengths and weaknesses are, and helps you to be, kind of poised to go. And as I say this, I'm wishing Josh was on because I remember, back in 2013, we inventoried and we didn't find emerald ash borer in Sherburne County for 10 years. And everybody thought I was a nut because, in 2013, I was saying, we have to do this, we have to get ready. And everybody was like, well, we're ready. And it was almost like a letdown that emerald ash borer wasn't in the communities yet. But thankfully, in 2023, it showed up and graced us with its presence in a hot and heavy way. Because all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, we're seeing it everywhere now. So it's kind of insidious at first, even though we were doing really as much proactive steps as we could take. We also, with that same contingent of volunteers, we worked to kind of look for EAB. So once the tree inventories were complete, we started doing a woodpecker activity survey. So in the fall, or I'm sorry, the early spring of every year, like March, before the leaves are out on the trees and it's very easy to see the trunks, we had volunteers going out with binoculars in specified areas, like along trails, around areas where people congregate publicly, um, to look for evidence of emerald ash borer. And that evidence shows up best in um, early spring, like March, because that's when the larvae under the bark are like prime for eating. And the woodpeckers really go after them with kind of a fierce, fierce pecking, and it flecks the outer bark off. So you have this really characteristic blonding effect, and you can see where there's actual emerald ash borer. So anything that was suspect, we were able to reach out to the Department of Ag and have them come and check and verify and pull larvae and have that identified by an entomologist. So we actually didn't find EAB that way. Um, and Josh is on now. So I'm going to just say a few more things and then I'm going to let Josh introduce himself. Um, but from the Sherburne County perspective, a- as far as EAB goes, we're really sitting in a pretty good position in species composition when it comes to trees because we are in the heart of the Anoka Sand Plain. The majority of our tree canopy is oak and pine. So losing the ash trees, yes, it's going to be um, concerning and it will be a huge loss of environmental services. It's not going to be um, as devastating as the presence of emerald ash borer in the black ash swamps of Minnesota. And that was always my like huge motivation in trying to be ready and slow it down because Sherburne County is kind of along the way from southern Minnesota to northern Minnesota, where a lot of people vacation. We have two major highways, um, 169 and Highway 10. We have the Mississippi River as our southern border. So we have all these corridors for EAB to travel really, really fast. And being that one of Minnesota's largest forest types is actually black ash swamps, emerald ash borer getting to northern Minnesota and those 1 million acres of wetland forest will be devastating because those are monotype forests. It's just black ash, and they provide a huge regulation for water level and habitat and all these other environmental services, carbon sequestration, oxygen production, all of those things. And so to have that wiped out and have nothing to really replace it is pretty scary. Um, and so in Sherburne County, each community is kind of taking their own approach with the groundwork that was laid 12 years ago with the surveys and the preparedness plans. Um, they each know the percentage of tree canopy that is is ash trees in their community, and they can then move forward with planting the appropriate species to maintain a pretty high level of diversity in their tree canopy. So they all know don't plant all maple because the Asian longhorn beetle is kind of one of those next threats. Um, and so to really strive for a high level of diversity between tree genuses is really important. Um, and I apologize if I'm bouncing all over the place. Um, I could talk about this all day, and I have probably too much to share, and I don't want to go down rabbit trails. We could have future focused forums on condition rating, on appropriate tree species for replanting, things like that. But this is really just an initial conversation to get us all talking about EAB and have a space to share about where we're at and get tips from each other. Um, and I'll talk about what Sherburne County is doing in the parks and on the county owned property after Josh gets an opportunity to talk. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Josh. Josh, I did introduce who you are, who you work for, and your title. And so I'm going to just hand it over to you and you can talk about Elk River's approach.
Okay, everybody can hear me? Okay, so, I'm Gino already obviously told you, I'm the City of Elk River Parks Foreman. So the City of Elk River is about 44 square miles. It's a very big area and, about, I think it was 4 years ago now, 3 years ago when they founded in Elk River. It was a tree company doing some, pruning at a old folks home that was nothing but ash. And one of their tree trimmers found it in a branch. Department of Ag came out and verified it. And that's what kind of led to how are we going to manage this? Up until that time, we were treating some trees. We had some grant dollars from different things. We had some city dollars that we put towards treatment but we knew that was not sustainable. We were just doing it until, the problem hit us, which it finally did. So, we developed a plan. It was a rather aggressive plan, that we brought to our council. And so our plan is we went through every neighborhood. We were going to go through every neighborhood and measure the right of way and anything in the right of way, that was an ash tree, we would be removing it at no cost to the homeowner. And our standard was if the tape measure hit the face of the tree, that was considered in our right of way. So that was approved by our city council. We did not have anything about continuously treating other trees in our right of ways. We did decide also to remove all ash in our park system. We would be replacing a majority of those with different species and a diverse species of trees, like Gina had said. So this going into this winter was our first winter for removals in our right of way. So myself and the street foreman, we would take a neighborhood and we would measure every single tree. This seems like a daunting task, and going into it, I thought it would be. It was not that bad. And you really get to see your trees and what other species of trees you have in your right of ways and in your town when you get to be boots on the ground doing this every day. So our strategy was we would put something out on our city social media page that we would be doing this. That kind of got everybody to know about it. And then we'd go into a neighborhood. If a tree was in a right of way, in our right of way, we would then put a door hanger that we had made on the property owner's house. And so they would know. We soon discovered that most people don't use their front doors. So we would try to put them on their garage door if they had a handle on them, or stick it in the crack of a garage door or something else, because right away we learned we were putting them on their front doors, and unless they had a Ring door camera or some other kind of camera, they didn't know. And then we were showing up with our crew to remove the trees and they thought, what is going on? Why didn't anybody let us know? And we did. So we soon discovered that we had to do alternative ways to inform them on the door knocker side of things. So we would go through, we'd measure, put these door knockers out always a week ahead of removals, so that if anybody had any questions or concerns, it gave them a week. And we'd always do it on a Tuesday or Wednesday so that there was a weekend in between. We did that strategically so that if they weren't home during the week, or they got home after dark, because obviously it gets dark early in the winter and they didn't see these door knockers, they would be home on the weekend. So we always had a weekend in between. So we do it on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and then plan to do removals starting on like a Tuesday in a neighborhood, so that and you don't think about this kind of stuff before you start doing it until after you start getting the complaints. And there was no time to address it before you were not necessarily complaints. It was really surprising to me how many people did not complain. We probably had less than 5 get really frustrated about it. Maybe 5 out of all the homeowners that we removed the trees from. So the surprising thing was we got more complaints that isn't, you're going to remove my neighbor's, why isn't my tree going to be removed, because it should be in the right of way. And then we'd go out there on a Monday, because obviously they usually called us on a weekend. We go there on a Monday, measure it in front of them and show them, hey, you missed by, an inch or 2 inches, and then they would know, which they got very frustrated in a couple of instances, because they wanted, that means they're going to have to take care of the tree or have a tree company do it, and it's going to be out of cost to them. Where their neighbor, the tree was 2 inches closer, no cost to them. So, yeah, that's why we did that with a Tuesday or Wednesday door hanger, and then start removals on Tuesday. Many people were very happy that we were going to do this, so that they didn't have the cost, like I said. So our crews would come in, we removed the trees, and we almost immediately, like next day or next 2 days, also ground the stump. We just ground it just below the soil, so we didn't have to do locates or anything, but then we would do black dirt, put black dirt down, and then seed. So it was basically, the tree is gone. You don't even know what was missing when we were done with the process. We removed about, it's either 156 or 158 ash trees this last winter, with our crew in right-of-ways. In parks, we did about 60 ash trees. And so that's a lot of material to get rid of and figure it out. We have a compost site in our county that many other cities in our county also have, and we didn't want to fill it up. So our next best solution is, we had 2 different locations of parks, one on one side of town, one on the other side of town, that we cleared a big area. There was a big clearing in one, and the other one was in a wide open prairie grass area that we mowed before the snow came, and piled all our material there and burned it. It was a lot of burning. We worked with our fire department to get permits to burn it, usually making sure that there was either it was raining or there was at least 3 inches of snow on the ground. And so we burned all this material. It was a lot of burning. We have about 60 yards of ash from that's 3 dump truckloads approximately of ash. Actually, it would be a little more than that, but we then worked with the landfill, got a permit to dump the ash there. And that's how we got rid of it, because at the end of the winter, we had giant piles of ash from all our ash trees. So that was our process. It seemed to go well. Like I said, we worked the kinks out very quickly with the Tuesday and Wednesday door knockers. Next Tuesday, start removals. We made it in one winter through half of our town. Now, that's 44 square miles and different developments. A lot of that was in a lot of younger developments where the ash trees were 25 feet or shorter. We have some of our older developments in town that we did not go into yet. We also did that strategically because a lot of those ash trees are 30-inch trees, and we wanted people to start seeing what we were doing and go through the grieving process, so to say, about those big trees that were gonna come down. And we didn't want to start with them. So we did it with the small trees first in the newer developments so that they could see that that was happening and be prepared to do that. So another aspect of this is, let's say a homeowner was adamant about it. They wanted to take over that tree even though it's in the right of way. I think we had 3 of those out of all the trees that we measured, that the homeowner had already treated it or was adamant about keeping the tree and treating it in the future. Our policy said that didn't matter, we were just gonna cut them. But we soon realized that that was not a viable option to some of these people that were really passionate about their tree. And if they are gonna continue treating it, that's doing the responsible homeowner thing. So what we did in that case, we checked with their city attorney, we would email them, basically just stating that they understood that this is now becoming their tree. And if it does get EAB and dies, it would be up to them to remove it. And then the email was our proof of, basically that we gave them ownership of that tree, even though it's in our right of way. And like I said, it was only 3 that were very passionate about those trees. So it really seemed to work this year. I don't know if other cities are doing that aggressive of an approach. I feel that it's pretty aggressive, but it's worked really well. And I'm a tree guy. I like trees. I don't like to see them cut down. Um, However, it really seems like this was a good approach and way less complaining than I ever thought there would be. Going into it, I thought, oh, people are going to be, you know, out with their pitchforks and axes and just mad at us. And it was exactly the opposite. Everybody was very happy that we were going to spend city dollars to remove these trees rather than them having to spend their own dollars. So, that's kind of what we did. I'd be happy to answer any questions, or Gina, if you want to talk about what the county's doing. But yeah, I'm sure there is some questions if anybody would like to ask those.
Yeah, I guess the county is one of the landowners who lives adjacent to City of Elk River right away because our county government center is on an Elk River road. And so the ash trees, the big mature ash trees that are growing in the right of way on the north side of our building are providing considerable environmental services for the county, and aesthetic benefits. So the county opted to do a condition rating analysis, and we have them all mapped, and we repeat the condition rating every year. And every tree that had a condition rating of, I think it was 3.7 out of 5, we opted to treat. And we're treating with specifically emamectin benzoate or triage, and that's the chemical that's injected into the root flare. Um, because that chemical has the um, least likelihood to impact beneficial insects, because it does not go into the soil. It is not taken up by other plants. It is expressed in the leaves to kill feeding adult emerald ash borer, and it is in the vascular system, so it kills EAB larvae. So those trees we will treat every other year. And as the trees that are not treated because they didn't have a high enough condition rating start to decline to the point where they're not providing services, or they become a high liability, the county will remove them at our own expense. And then this fall, we're planting additional trees on the south side of that road try and build up or reinforce the environmental services that are eventually going to be lost from those ash trees. And I do see a question from Travis. Travis, you can go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, so listening to Josh's story, I kind of have it's maybe a couple of questions that are in there. So I just kind of want to um, maybe illustrate where I'm going and then let Josh answer that, because with that story, the first question that I have, I think you said you removed 158 trees, got through half the town. So the first question is, are you going through and actively planting new specimens in those boulevards? And then the secondary one, um, the the emerald ash borer, or the situation with ash trees does bring up just something that in general I've kind of had a little different battle, and that is, we get, we'll say, sewer systems, et cetera, that sometimes get affected by these big mature trees. And when you started talking about some of these homeowners that are adjacent to your right of ways taking ownership, it is kind of interesting, because a lot of times my personal attitude has been, if this tree is destructive to our infrastructure, sidewalks, any of the pipes, etc., we'll just remove it, because I feel like it's on our right of way. I don't give too much, to the homeowners, but I do get the same type of pressure as they get used to that. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that situation, because it is kind of interesting. And then of course with replanting, in all, it's a big cost with everything. So I am interested to hear how you've done that. Thanks.
Okay, first of all, yes, replanting. We are not going through and replanting anything in our right of ways. We've had homeowners ask about that if they could. We try to then encourage them to go beyond the right of way line, so that, if they do plant a species of tree, that the same fate happens in the future with another disease or anything. It's not it's not in our right of way. So we noticed too, doing this, many of the new developments, I'm talking within the last 10 years, they don't plant any trees in the right of way. We'd go through these developments just looking for ash trees. None of them had ash trees at all. And every tree in the development was behind the right of way line. So this was obviously a practice that happened, more than 10 years ago, to plant trees in the right of way. A lot of developers now are realizing this and planting them beyond. So we are not planting any. We are planting more than normal in our park system. Even though we didn't take a ton of trees out of our park system, we're planting more than normal, so that when people say, why are you taking these trees and not planting them? Well, we are planting them. We're planting them in our park system. We've tried to diversify. Knowing this was coming over the last 5 years, we've planted a more diverse species list, and I kind of went off of that by my order and what we did plant this year. I have my list here. We did some beech trees. I don't know if any of you have gone to the Shade Tree Short Course and seen kind of the progression of different species that they're trying. These are all trees that are making it now. So another one is Ohio Buckeye, Kentucky Coffee. We've had really good luck with Princeton elms over the last 10 years. They're all surviving great. They have a nice form. So we've done Princeton elms, some magnolias. I happened to see a couple giant magnolias in town in people's yards, measuring ash trees this year. And I thought, well, if they're making it, we're going to try those as well. If they don't make it, failed attempt, but we're going to try it. Several mountain ashes. We have some of those in town, and I know they will survive. So we've tried some mountain ash. red buds. I know that's not a really tall tree, but it's a beautiful tree in the spring. We have a couple in town that are doing great, so that are very mature. So I tried some of those. And then a few maples as well, just the red maples, not like I know maples require a lot more trimming, so I tried to stay away from those because of the trimming aspect, and just trying these new trees. Swamp white oak is another one that I did. We're seeing in our parks when we're doing our oak wilt removals that the swamp white oaks are not as affected. I think we've only seen a couple that were dead in a very dense stand of red oak. Otherwise, they do not get affected by the oak wilt, so we tried some of those as well. So as far as planting, I think we put in about 50 trees this year. We already did that a couple weeks ago, but like I said, not in our right of ways, just in our park system. So we're replacing them in that form. As far as trees and roots and this tree is now affecting a sewer line or something like that, I have not thought about that. We have not run into that problem. I mean, we've run into that problem with trees, but not in an ash tree that um we've given ownership to the homeowner, and now that homeowner, that tree is affecting a root. I think that's what you're talking about, or a root of that tree is affecting a sewer line. Um, if that's what if I'm understanding that correct, I think that'd be a case by case basis, if that was the case. So am I answering that properly?
Josh, I think you kind of hit on it early when you took over. What's interesting is I think the problem maybe a lot of these communities are dealing with is this seemed to be a practice that precedes us by many years. I'm dealing with silver maples, which are incredibly huge. They tear up sidewalks. They get into and even the oak trees will get into the sewer lines. Any tree that has a root system big enough is looking for water. So if you got a crack in a sewer line, etc., that's what they're finding their way into. My community, I've got areas so bad that out of 20 residents on a street block, 18 of them could be roto rooting every year, and I mean it's really telltale what's happening. So um, in general, I know this is specific to the ash problem right now, but you kind of answered the trouble, or I mean, you answered it by saying your developers, et cetera, are putting them off the right of way, because that is one of the ways that I've approached this too. The homeowners, let's just say if I do plant trees in the boulevard, I make it very clear that we've got the right to take them out when we want to. And I think it's this planting and push it on to the next person. That's happened. A lot of my trees are probably 80 years old, and it sounds like you're dealing with some too that were planted. But I'm very skeptical. I do try to push new trees onto the property, where even I'll give it to them from the city, but I don't want to see it where I'm pulling out sidewalk and replacing sewers at a cost to the city. And I mean, in general, it's a large expense. So anyway, I appreciate the sharing on it, because it sounds like maybe a lot of these communities, it was just a practice of the past.
Yeah, and I know we're gonna run into that in these other developments that will come in the future winters. We kind of thought that it would be a 3-year plan to get through the city, so getting through half of it this year was good. But like I said, it's those older developments that are upcoming that we have had the problems with roots in sewer lines and ripping up sidewalks. And when those because they are older developments, they're in the right of way. We've already had problems with those, and now if the homeowner comes to us and says, "Well, I'd really like to uh keep my tree and have it signed over to me," well then what happens with those trees? So we might have to reach that point when we get there, as far as working with the city attorney if something like that happens. So I guess we'll get to that point when we get there. We haven't run into that yet, because we haven't done removals on those larger trees, but that could be coming.
Thanks, Josh. Any other questions at this moment? So I would just add that in Sherburne County parks, I mentioned Sherburne County is in a pretty good situation because we're in the heart of the Anoka Sand Plain, and that's very true for our parks. We are largely oak savanna, dry oak forest, and prairie, although we do have quite a bit of river floodplain, river corridor, and there's a pretty decent ash component in that floodplain. And we are seeing EAB in there. Um, However, it's a good mixed canopy. There are basswood and silver maple and a lot of other native species, box elder, which are phenomenal for pollinators. They're an early succession species. So it's not as if in those corridors we're going to lose environmental services of tree canopy. However, where the ash trees are going to be a liability, where they're next to trails or areas where people gather, those trees will probably be preemptively removed, especially if they have a lien or a defect that really makes them a larger liability for safety. Um, Other than that, in our natural systems, EAB kind of helps us out in restoration of oak savanna because ash is very shade tolerant and it readily fills in oak savannas that haven't had fire for decades or centuries. So that's kind of been our approach in the natural areas. It'd be interesting to hear from others kind of what your current challenge or struggle is, or maybe a recent victory that you've realized in the journey of emerald ash borer.
A lot of people may not be experiencing this yet and are just,
Mhm.
much like the city of Elk River was 5 years ago, just anticipating what it's gonna look like and formulating plans and everything. I wanna stress again to everyone that I thought our plan was terrible. I thought that there would be so many people upset, and it was exactly opposite. So, um, it's okay to think outside the box because the outcome that you think will happen might not be the outcome. So, um, it was very surprising to me, the happiness that it brought people knowing that EAB was coming and we were gonna cut down the trees, without having any cost to them. So I didn't see that part of it, but that was a definite result of the way we were gonna remove them.
Yeah, and we've also done a lot of tree planting in our parks. And someone mentioned the concern around getting those trees established and watering. It is a huge lift. We've gone to planting most, if not all, of our trees after September, but before killing frost, so they can um, not have to undergo such a transplant shock and a potential drought right after being transplanted. We also plant smaller uh, stock. We don't like to plant anything over sapling size because it's so much harder to get it to survive. Um, the more top portion of a tree in ratio to the amount of root, the harder the tree is going to, the harder it is going to be for the tree to actually establish. So we really have taken that to heart recently because it seems like even if it's not considered a drought year, we still have several weeks with insignificant rain and we're out there watering. And sometimes even then it doesn't make a difference. And we're in as I guess said before, we're in the Inuka sand plain and it's really sandy and really dry. So we've had some good luck with hickories, both shagnut and bitternut. Those are two other species that I would encourage people to try and source if you're able to.
Quick question on that. Um, so you mentioned you only plant saplings or smaller, correct?
Hmm.
Um, so my question is, do you find that that requires more watering and care for more years, 3, 4, 5 years down the road now than a more established tree, or are you finding that not to be true?
No, I think that would actually be opposite,
Huh.
because so there, you know, the more branch and leaf area a tree has, the more resources it's going to demand from the soil. And so when you plant a tree, the first thing it wants to do is to reestablish enough root mass to support the top growth. And so when you plant a really large tree, even if it's spayed in, that's still like a fraction of the tree's whole potential root system at that size. And so the tree wants to reestablish its savings account, right? So it can support the cost of its house. And when you plant a smaller tree, it doesn't take the tree as long to establish enough root system to support the amount of plant mass above the ground. And the amount of natural rainfall should be enough after a few years, unless we hit like an extraordinary drought. And of course, it also matters um, what is on the ground surface over the root system. Is it a really healthy turf? Um, then the tree is going to struggle more because turf is such a water hog, and the roots of the turf intercept any precipitation that could potentially reach the tree's root system. And so it's really, I mean, I don't know where everybody's at in tree care and all of that, but really what's best for the tree is to try it at best to mimic the forest floor and just have a natural shredded hardwood mulch over the root system. And I know from a practicality standpoint in a maintained landscape, that's really problematic when it comes to maintenance. Um, However, we're starting to move to that in our only park that has maintained turf. We're naturalizing the critical root zone of a historic white oak. So we are kind of restoring forest flora underneath, and we're using cardboard and shredded hardwood mulch to prep and kill the turf. So we're not using any herbicide on that root system, and we're restoring native forbs and grasses under um, the crown of that tree to try and make that tree as healthy as we can. One of the other things that we're doing on that tree is called preservation arboriculture. So that's really scientific method of pruning that helps the tree age with less chance of limb failure and breakage. So really kind of fascinating science when you get to know the ins and outs of it. But um, so as far as getting trees to establish, it really comes down to the health of the root system, I guess is what I was saying.
Um,
That's
sorry.
That's I was just going to say that is very interesting, and it's actually good to hear in many ways because it's, um, those trees are um, less expensive. And, our challenge is, in 2025 alone in Austin, we will have removed about 1,500 ash trees. And ash trees are like 18.7% of our tree population. So 1 in 5 trees our ash trees, and they're going to be gone in the next year and a half. So it's scary to me. And then so now we have to replant, but we don't have the staff and the labor and the resources to water, uh, you know, even for a few years. So that's what we're trying to tackle. Um, so this, and I'm doing an RFP for the purchase of trees right now. That's going to be, I mean, trees are expensive. When you're doing, we were looking at 1 to 2 inch caliper size trees, thinking that we could water and care for 2 to 3 years. But I might switch gears a little bit and research planting saplings, and as opposed to more established trees to help us grow, because I mean we can't ignore the replanting. It's just that's the most challenging part of this whole situation with the emerald ash borer is planting trees, because we've also not planted enough trees in the last 30 years. So even before emerald ash borer, I feel like we were behind on planting. So um, that's refreshing news to give me some other angle to look at with our staff, and to see if there's another approach to this. So thank you for that information.
To piggyback on the mulch, that Gina had said, I went to an interesting class this spring, regarding mulch volcanoes, and everybody knows that, for a while, everybody said, do mulch, and then they said, don't do mulch. And, this speaker that did this class was really interesting because he said, look at your landscape, whether it be in parks or even in businesses around your town. And those mulch volcanoes that everybody hates, or if mulch is done correctly, they do hold that water in more sufficiently, and they do not get hit by weed whips. And a weed whip will kill a tree faster than mulch ever will. So even if you don't like the mulch, those trees are all still alive because they're not getting hit by weed whips, and they are holding that water, not requiring as much watering. So that really brought after I went to that class, I started looking around town, and he was right. All the trees that had mulch are still alive. And there's
Yeah.
many that don't, that you can tell died because of weed whips.
Right, right. And and the decomposition of the natural shredded hardwood mulch um, adds to the soil life, and that is hugely important for trees' health because it contributes to the beneficial mycorrhizal community that helps the tree's roots actually absorb more water and more nutrients. Um, so soil health in the tree root zone is one of the biggest aspects. And then over time, that decomposition increases organic matter and water holding capacity. So I see where we have 2 minutes, so I'd say we have time for one more question. I did put a link to the community forestry grants through the DNR in the chat. And I also put a link to recommended trees for climate ready woodlands in the chat. So if you want to take a moment to check those out, those are two good resources. And I'm going to put my email in the chat. And Josh, if you could put your email in the chat, then if people have follow-up questions, they want to reach out to either of us. Okay, there we go. Well, thanks for joining us today, everybody. I hope there was at least a couple of takeaways for you, and hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you to both of you.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer.
Yep. Have a great day.
You too.
You too.